spiritual principles exist that traverse the centuries like silent yet unyielding subterranean rivers, awaiting only the individual who chooses to drink from that ancient wellspring to fundamentally revitalize their life. Among these tenets, one is so elemental and so often overlooked that many spend decades seeking convoluted answers, while the secret rests in the habitual manner in which they speak, think, and describe their desires. Florence Scovel Shinn consistently taught that language is not a peripheral detail but the unseen template that precedes any external transformation. She maintained that what the mouth whispers with seeming innocence becomes law for the subconscious, and the subconscious, compliant as a silent scribe, transcribes these words as mandates that the world must fulfill. It is as if every expression constitutes a vibrational signature that determines the future yield. This insight, though as ancient as the most remote histories, still astonishes those who finally realize that it was never destiny, fortune, or adversity that controlled their prosperity, but rather the way they articulated their experiences. If an individual believes that money is scarce, fickle, and arduous to maintain, this conviction permeates their daily discourse, and unknowingly, they become the messenger of their own limitation. When commenting on expenditures, they reiterate that everything is excessively burdensome. Upon glancing at their wallet, they declare the amount is never adequate. In conversation with friends, they turn scarcity into a ceaseless narrative. By doing this, they are not merely describing a transient situation. They are proclaiming the kind of reality they permit entry to. Florence Scovel Shinn asserted that human beings do not live what they wish for, they live what they decree. Yet, few people grasp this dynamic, for they imagine that only solemn affirmations possess power, when in reality, the phrases that slip out without reflection carry energy as intense as any formal invocation. The universe does not differentiate the tone. It responds to the fundamental vibration of the words. Consider someone who always comments, laughing, that they are perpetually scrambling to pay their bills. This person believes they are being light-hearted and witty, but the internal law operating in the deep mind does not register sarcasm. It merely records the pattern. Or imagine someone who consistently describes themselves as jinxed, as someone who never encounters opportunity. This type of declaration, reiterated over months or years, shapes the way life unfolds. Not because punishment exists, but because correspondence exists. When an individual spontaneously adopts the identity of someone constrained, they set the stage for constrained situations to manifest. Florence Scovel Shinn stated that the word either clears the path or obstructs the flow, depending on the seed planted. Now, envision an alternative scenario. A person resolves, even in the absence of immediate results, to fundamentally overhaul their internal and external discourse. Instead of reiterating phrases indicative of financial exhaustion, they elect to describe money as something that flows organically, something responsive to their confidence. They begin affirming that solutions are always forthcoming, that the requisite resources invariably materialize, and that provision perpetually exists. This is not hyperbole. Rather, they choose to narrate their life from the paradigm of abundance. They do not magically obliterate reality, but instead begin to sculpt a new reality by aligning their thoughts with their declarations. Florence Scovel Shinn asserted that the invisible must be established before the visible can manifest. And the primary means of establishing the invisible is through conscious articulation. When an individual masters this principle, they recognize that careless speech is not trivial. When they declare something is impossible, they are essentially decreeing an impediment. When they announce that money is hard, they reinforce an identity defined by struggle. When they state that they cannot proceed, they generate the emotional climate that perpetuates the delay. This entire process unfolds not through divine retribution, but via vibrational congruence. The word acts as a conduit. Depending on the utterance, this conduit either leads to abundance or directs one toward emotional dearth. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the word is the initial creative movement of consciousness. It is the catalyst. It is the cue that awakens the subconscious, prompting it to repeat the established pattern. What many label financial reality constitutes nothing more than the persistent repetition of the most dominant convictions the individual harbors within themselves. There are those who contend that none of this could be so decisive, arguing that money appears to be too practical a component to be influenced by language. Yet these arguments overlook the fact that nearly everything we term concrete reality originated from a mental image undergirded by some form of internal declaration. Before a professional launches a business, they first had to envision themselves as capable. Before someone can genuinely flourish, they must forsake words rooted in fear and embrace language of expansion. Preceding any achievement lies the unseen territory of conviction. The deep mind operates like fertile ground, receiving seeds daily. Some seeds bear immediate fruit. Others remain dormant until they encounter suitable conditions. But all respond to germination. Florence Scovel Shinn stated that no one reaps what they have not sown. If one sows words of hardship, they will reap emotional and financial difficulty. If one sows words of security, they will reap unforeseen opportunities. This dynamic is constant, infallible, and straightforward, yet few practice it with sustained diligence. To grasp this concept clearly, one need only observe human behavior. Individuals who speak serenely about their possibilities tend to act with greater intrepidity. Those who characterize life as arduous often hesitate, fear, and become disheartened before even attempting the endeavor. The variable is not merely financial, but stems from one's internal disposition. When an individual defines themselves through pessimistic language, they begin to perceive themselves as perpetually needing to strive. Conversely, when defined by words of competence, they create space for their own subconscious to illuminate previously unseen pathways. Florence Scovel Shinn posited that the deep mind functions as a loyal assistant. It executes precisely what you declare about yourself, without debate, without assessing viability, and without censure. It merely implements. Numerous individuals desire prosperity yet maintain narratives that contradict this aspiration. They assert a desire for stability, but describe life using phrases that reinforce instability. They long for tranquility, but employ expressions of resistance. They seek abundance, yet reiterate tales of scarcity. This is akin to attempting to walk north while facing south. Energy fails to coalesce. Life lacks a discernible trajectory. Florence Scovel Shinn observed that no advancement occurs when one's speech contravenes their intention. The word is the spiritual steering wheel of life. Failing to turn the wheel toward the correct path prevents one from reaching their desired destination. This is why the realization of this principle fundamentally alters the perspective of those who embrace it. The individual comprehends that they need not wait for circumstances to shift before speaking more constructively. Rather, they speak better so that circumstances may subsequently change. This is not delusion. It is internal order. The word precedes the fact. Just as an architect drafts prior to construction, consciousness names prior to manifestation. Florence Scovel Shinn asserted that mastery of speech dictates the course of one's journey, not through sheer force, but through resonance. Once this understanding is genuinely internalized, the individual begins to discern the gravity inherent in every expression. A minor phrase uttered in frustration can evolve into an emotional impediment. A sentence spoken with conviction can unlock unforeseen opportunities. Nothing is neutral. Nothing is inconsequential. The subconscious is perpetually listening, perpetually recording, perpetually orchestrating corresponding forms. This explains why different people facing similar conditions respond to life in such disparate ways. Those who govern their speech shape their internal climate, and this internal climate determines external occurrences. Florence Scovel Shinn claimed that conscious speech is the closest instrument to magic that a human being can utilize on a daily basis. When one begins scrutinizing their own speech with greater diligence, they realize the extent of automaticity present in how they describe life. Many expressions arise habitually, inherited from others, from culture, environment, and everyday discourse. Unwittingly, individuals absorb phrases not born of their own insight, yet which begin to dictate their inner energy. Florence Scovel Shinn cautioned that many significant human limitations do not stem from conscious intent, but from small declarations repeated without vigilance. They appear innocuous, yet they function as threads weaving a subtle reality, until one day the individual finds themselves dwelling within a tapestry they themselves helped interweave. Upon gaining awareness of this, a new power awakens, because perception unlocks the door to greater mastery over the spoken word and, consequently, over destiny. When you alter the way you describe money, something shifts within the deep structure of the mind. It is as if a previously sealed door begins to creak open, releasing a passage where a wall once stood. Florence Scovel Shinn asserted that money possesses an obedient nature, not because it is an entity with its own will, but because it responds to the image you project upon it. When someone treats money as a problem, it seems to dissipate. When someone regards it as the natural flow of life, it behaves more harmoniously. It is not the money itself that changes, but the internal field that sustains its presence. Therefore, when an individual begins to affirm that their provision is constant, their supply is secure, and their financial life is guided by divine order, they are not merely crafting pleasant phrases. They are altering an emotional frequency that previously attracted obstacles. A common example lies in the difference between living by perpetually fighting financial fires and living in a state of clear direction. Those who characterize themselves as perpetually financially constrained typically make impulsive decisions, often driven by fear. This internal state invariably generates further delays and increased tension. Conversely, when someone defines themselves as provided for, sustained, and guided, this definition fosters calmer behavior. Decisions begin to be made with confidence. Solutions manifest more naturally because the mind is no longer beholden to despair. Florence Scovel Shinn maintained that the subconscious mind does not perform well in an atmosphere of panic. It thrives when the spoken word is firm, clear, and aligned with confidence. This principle holds true even concerning the people in our immediate sphere. Individuals who habitually assert the world's hostility inevitably begin to perceive antagonism in environments that were previously characterized by neutrality. Conversely, those who proclaim life's inherent generosity start discerning doors where they previously saw only insurmountable walls. This shift is not due to any external alteration, but rather a transformation in their internal disposition. And when this inner climate shifts, so too does one's interpretation of reality. Florence Scovel Shinn posited that one's vision is contingent upon the window through which they gaze. The spoken word acts as the frame for this window. A pessimistic frame constructs a bleak landscape. A confident frame, conversely, establishes a fertile vista. Many of Florence's students were astonished to realize that the failure lay not in the efficacy of their prayers, but in the persistence of their self-contradiction. They would utter powerful affirmations in the morning, only to spend the remainder of the day cultivating expressions of profound frustration. It mirrored the act of lighting a lantern and then repeatedly, yet unconsciously, extinguishing the wick. Successful manifestation necessitates that this inner flame remains perpetually alight, and it is sustained by the manner in which an individual communicates with both the external world and their inner self. When one consciously chooses to purge declarations of scarcity from their lexicon, they effectively create the requisite space for abundance to manifest. They are not engaging in the denial of hardship. Rather, they are refusing to grant the difficulty the power they previously ceded to it. A similar dynamic is observed in those who routinely state that their endeavors yield no return. Such a declaration generates an aura of preemptive defeat. It is tantamount to broadcasting to the subconscious mind that no action taken will ever prove adequate. Consequently, the individual begins to operate with diminished vigor, weakened conviction, and reduced vitality, thereby reinforcing the detrimental cycle. However, when this phrase is replaced by the assertion that their journey is divinely guided, that every endeavor is fruitful, and that the universe responds to their intentional movement, their vital energy is immediately rekindled. This renewed energy catalyzes the emergence of novel ideas, the sudden appearance of opportunities, and the manifestation of synchronicities. Florence Scovel Shinn maintained that the spoken word paves invisible pathways before it opens visible ones. Furthermore, it is crucial to grasp that verbal discipline does not equate to artificial rigidity. It is not a matter of self-censorship to the extent that one sacrifices authenticity. Rather, it is the recognition that the word is a potent creative instrument and must be wielded with deliberate consciousness. One might liken it to holding a paintbrush that sketches the surrounding atmosphere. If that brush is utilized without specific intent, it inevitably yields confused scrolls. When utilized with focus, however, it renders entire landscapes. Florence Scovel Shinn asserted that mastery over one's speech constitutes mastery over the art of cultivating internal environments conducive to prosperity. The common misconception shared by many is the belief that this only works when repeated with solemnity. It does not. What truly catalyzes transformation is the cumulative effect of your speech over the course of days, weeks, and months. A single affirmation uttered with conviction holds power, but when you spend the entire day reinforcing contradictory notions, the affirmation is rendered impotent. This is why Florence taught that it is essential to observe the most unassuming moments. How you speak when you are weary, when you are disheartened, when you are distracted. It is these instances that reveal the underlying decree that is being established. And these are the moments that must be gently transformed, without force, by replacing every limiting statement with an affirmation of confidence. Upon applying this principle, individuals begin to realize that their relationship with money is not contingent upon luck or misfortune. It hinges on how they present themselves before it, much like standing before a mirror. If they claim money abandons them, they live in a state of abandonment. If they declare money respects them, they live respected. If they deem money rebellious, they are constantly plagued by exigencies. If they state money is cooperative, their financial life begins to mirror that cooperation. Florence Scovel Shinn asserted that prosperity is not seized through force, but achieved through the alignment of word, intention, and emotion. This marks the juncture where many people initiate their true internal paradigm shift, for they finally grasp that one does not need to contend against life. It is necessary to engage with it in the proper manner. It is necessary to designate every aspect of life with sagacity, composure, and resolve. It is necessary to declare that money is of service, that the path unfolds, that the supply flows freely. The power resides not in the volume of the voice, but in the vibration of certainty. Now, before we proceed further, I extend an invitation rooted in the same intention that guided the teachings of Florence Scovel Shinn. If this message resonates deeply within you, consider subscribing to the channel to journey alongside this community committed to living with greater consciousness, clarity, and abundance. Your presence here fortifies this space and encourages the perpetuation of this type of content. Furthermore, should you wish to participate actively, share a new phrase in the comments that you have chosen to supplant an antiquated pattern. Something simple, authentic, representing your new approach to conversing with life. It need not be elaborate, merely truthful. This interaction is not a mere formality. It reinforces internal commitment and helps others realize they are not isolated in this process of change. There is a juncture in the journey of those who awaken to the potency of their own word when life begins to manifest subtle indicators of transformation. These are seemingly minor shifts, such as the way one responds to an unexpected invoice or the composure with which they regard an expenditure that previously would have caused consternation. These signs are like the breeze that precedes a change of season. The individual begins to realize they no longer speak of themselves as someone propelled by circumstances, but rather as someone who possesses an inner direction. According to Florence Scovel Shinn, this is the indication that the deep mind has commenced reordering its records, erasing antiquated decrees of limitation and replacing them with new patterns, more deeply aligned with life's innate abundance. In the course of this process, it is common for the individual to undergo gentle trials, not as punishment, but as an opportunity to reaffirm the newly adopted vibration. A minor delay, a situation that demands patience, a conversation that might tempt them to revert to former linguistic habits. These moments serve to consolidate the transformation. Florence stated that life frequently affords an opportunity for you to redeclare who you choose to be. This is not about resistance, but about fortification. It is analogous to someone learning a new language who must practice it in quotidian moments until it becomes second nature. The same holds true for the spiritual language of the creative word. The person who previously impulsively declared, "I never succeed," begins to recognize the gravitas of that phrase, and the instant it surfaces, they resolve to substitute it with, "Everything that is rightfully mine arrives at the precise moment." Over time, this substitution ceases to be an exertion and becomes an inherent mindset. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the subconscious learns through rhythm, repetition, and emotional conviction. When these three elements converge, the transformation becomes irreversible. It is at this juncture that many begin to realize that prosperity is not solely linked to finances. It is tied to the breadth of perspective with which one views their own life. An individual who describes themselves as deficient is not merely financially scarce. They are lacking in enthusiasm, in fortitude, and in the expectation of beneficence. Conversely, someone who characterizes themselves as abundant permits themselves to receive assistance, opportunities, insights, interactions, and possibilities that were previously obstructed by a closed mental posture. The word opens the heart, and an open heart allows life to flow unhindered. Money is merely one of the modalities through which this flow manifests. Florence Scovel Shinn asserted that everything you confidently articulate begins to coalesce around you like an invisible framework. What you claim as yours draws near. What you declare is abandoning you genuinely recedes. Consequently, when someone declares with conviction, "My life is guided by a greater force," that statement generates such a steady vibration that, even during times of uncertainty, the individual experiences a serenity they previously lacked. This is not emotional obstinacy. It is vibrational alignment. Another crucial aspect is that the word is not merely a creator, but also a healer. It rectifies distorted perceptions and reorients one's perspective. Many people harbor old financial grievances, failed ventures, squandered opportunities, periods of scarcity. These memories, when verbally reiterated, continue to exert influence on the present. By constantly recounting the same painful narrative, the individual emotionally reinforces a chapter that ought to have been closed. Florence taught that any narrative that diminishes one's power must be discontinued. This is not about denying the past, but about liberating it from the vibration that still keeps it active. Someone who habitually repeats, "I was wronged in that job," keeps the energy of that moment alive, even years later. By ceasing to utter that declaration and substituting it with something like, "Everything I have experienced has prepared me for what I receive today," the memory ceases to be an impediment and instead becomes a stepping stone. The past does not change, but the significance attributed to it does. And when the significance shifts, the burden vanishes. Florence Scovel Shinn stated that the word is capable of dissolving what emotion perpetuates. A well-chosen phrase can unravel an inner knot accumulated over decades. Another relevant point is that conscious speech does not mandate perfection. There is no need to become a robot devoid of spontaneity. Awareness arises in the moment immediately following the slip-up. If a habitual phrase escapes, one simply needs to correct it instantly. "That is not the truth about my life. What is true for me is the abundance that fortifies me." This correction acts as a gentle gesture that realigns the path. Florence claimed that the power lies not in never making a mistake, but in never lingering in the verbal misstep. When an individual begins to practice this, they become more sensitive to the emotional environment surrounding them. They start to recognize conversations they previously accepted without hesitation. Negative commentary, jokes about poverty, repetitive lamentations, bleak forecasts. Without arrogance, this person distances themselves from these atmospheres because they understand that every phrase heard is a potential seed. Florence Scovel Shinn stated that hearing constant declarations of lack is akin to breathing polluted air. Over time, this compromises inner clarity. And just as one avoids toxic environments, one must also avoid toxic verbal patterns. From this juncture, the emotional transformation evolves into a practical one. Money begins to respond differently because the individual has ceased viewing it as an antagonist and started treating it as a compliant resource. Ideas for resolving debts surface as if conjured from thin air. Someone recalls an opportunity that previously seemed improbable. The person discovers a means to organize their expenditures more sagaciously, not out of constriction, but out of clarity. The external world adjusts accordingly. Florence used to say that when you alter the designation you give to something, you fundamentally change how that entity behaves in your life. And precisely because this process is dynamic, you begin to observe that minor declarations of faith yield substantial results over time. A phrase reiterated daily with conviction is capable of generating an energetic foundation of the highest caliber. My supply is constant and secure. I move with ease. Money cooperates with me. The right doors open for me. These are not hollow mantras. They are creative acts. They are vibrational codes. They are keys that unlock states of consciousness. Florence Scovel Shinn posited that prosperity is not the arrival of large sums, but the internal state that allows what is rightfully yours to manifest spontaneously. And when the word becomes aligned with this state, life ceases to be a struggle and transforms into a dance. There is a moment in this transformative process where the individual's relationship with their own reflection shifts profoundly. They no longer gaze upon themselves with the feeling that something is lacking, like one observing an incomplete version of their own being. They begin to perceive themselves as someone already being constructed internally, as someone bearing a powerful, silent spark that organizes life from the inside out. Florence Scovel Shinn maintained that no physical mirror reveals who you truly are. The genuine mirror is the word you employ to describe yourself. This is the reflection the subconscious accepts as its actual image. This is why it is so profoundly transformative when one decides to unify word and perception. Upon confronting the mirror and declaring an elevated spiritual truth, the individual forges a direct link between what they see and what they establish as their identity. One need not utilize rehearsed phrases. It suffices to find a declaration that feels plausible enough for the heart to accept, yet elevated enough to expand consciousness. When the individual states to themselves something like, "I am guided by a silent abundance that never fails," this phrase begins to weave itself into the emotional fabric. And, when reiterated for consecutive days, the deep mind begins to treat it as a factual description of reality. Many people are afraid to speak highly of themselves, believing they will thereby be denying their struggles. However, Florence Scovel Shinn always explained that declaring a spiritual truth is not denying facts, but rather creating the space for more auspicious realities to materialize. Those who fear acknowledging their own inherent greatness keep the subconscious tethered to a diminished self-image. Those who allow themselves to declare something grander open the door for the universe to rearrange circumstances around that new vibration. It is akin to aligning a compass that was previously spinning aimlessly. The word spoken with tranquility becomes the guiding north. By practicing this synergy between vision and speech, an individual begins to perceive something that many disregard throughout their entire lives. Every external circumstance is merely an echo of an internal vibration. Scarcity echoes the belief in limitation. Abundance echoes the conviction of provision. Chaos echoes the belief in disorder. Tranquility echoes the belief in alignment. And because this law is so precise, every time one corrects a thought or an expression, something is rearranged, even if imperceptibly. Florence Scovel Shinn asserted that the outer life is a delayed reflection of the inner life. Everything that manifests as experience is consequence, not cause. Consequently, when an individual resolves to eliminate destructive language, they are achieving infinitely more than merely improving their vocabulary. They are fundamentally rewriting their emotional atmosphere. And this atmosphere serves as the filter through which the subconscious interprets everything. Consider someone who, for years, repeated burdensome phrases, such as, "Everything is difficult for me." The deep mind interpreted this as fact. Every time this person attempted to progress, they encountered obstacles, not because the world was conspiring against them, but because their vibration was signaling, "Expect difficulty, it is your habitual companion." When this individual finally awakens to the stewardship of the word and replaces that declaration with something like, "My paths are open and favored," the vibration shifts. They cease anticipating struggle and begin anticipating ease. And what the mind anticipates, it attracts. This is not an instantaneous process, but it is inevitable when consistency is maintained. Florence Scovel Shinn often said that the word is like a drop of water that, repeated daily, wears away stone. No single drop appears potent in isolation, but their accumulation forges a course. The same holds true for conscious speech. A declaration reiterated for weeks becomes an emotional groove, and the subconscious begins to allow life to follow that new trajectory. This is why it is crucial to persist in the new vibration even when nothing appears to change. The harvest rarely appears the day the seed is sown. It emerges the day the earth can no longer contain the seed. As this new state solidifies, one begins to notice that their intuition becomes more highly sensitized. Ideas emerge with greater clarity. Heretofore confused situations gain definition. Difficult decisions seem less daunting. The individual starts to feel that they are not walking this path alone. This is one of the clearest signs that the creative word is being assimilated by the subconscious. Florence used to say that intuition is the voice of the spirit speaking through the tranquil mind. And the tranquil mind is born of the well-chosen word. When you describe yourself as guided, you begin to hear the direction. When you describe yourself as provided for, you begin to notice opportunities. When you describe yourself as capable, you begin to act with fortitude. Another compelling phenomenon is that one's internal language becomes gentler. The individual ceases to engage in internal conflict. They stop attacking their own choices. They stop repeating narratives of failure. They recognize that every harsh pronouncement is an assault on their own destiny. Gentleness is not weakness. It is precision. Florence Scovel Shinn often said that the kind word is like the oil that removes emotional friction and allows everything to move with fluidity. A turbulent life subsides when the internal dialogue calms. A hurried life decelerates when one's speech becomes clear. A burdensome life brightens when internal expression is liberated from self-criticism. This does not imply ignoring actual problems. It means refusing to label them as definitive. One might look at a debt and not call it a prison, but rather a dissolving situation. They might look at a challenging phase and call it a moment of reorganization. They might look at a missed opportunity and call it redirection. Every label alters the way life responds. Florence asserted that you are never bound to a condition. You are bound to the name you give it. And when you change the name, the condition begins to erode from within. This is the point where the individual realizes that prosperity is not merely about receiving, but about keeping the flow in motion. It is akin to breathing. Inhaling is as crucial as exhaling. If one attempts only to receive without being open to giving, stagnation ensues. If one attempts to give without permitting reception, exhaustion is generated. Balanced prosperity emerges when the person views themselves as a conduit, neither an accumulator nor one who is depleted. Florence maintained that those who speak with gratitude amplify the flow, but those who speak with fear contract it. At this juncture in the process, many people begin to experience a profound shift. They start to feel that they deserve the good they desire. This sense of deserving is not born of hubris, but of the recognition that life is inherently abundant. When someone affirms, "I joyfully receive that which is mine by divine right," this statement activates a previously blocked permission within the subconscious. It is akin to unlocking an internal gate. There is a moment when the totality of this silent labor of conscious articulation becomes manifest. The individual who has dedicated days or weeks to transforming their internal dialogue suddenly perceives that formerly intricate situations begin to unravel with greater swiftness. This is not a mere stroke of luck, but the direct consequence of Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching. The word is the seed, and the experience is the fruit. When one sows confidence, they reap facility. When they sow security, they harvest direction. When they sow abundance, they garner opportunities. This principle may seem overly simplistic to those confined by the logic of excessive effort, yet it is utterly transformative for those who awaken to the subtle influence of verbal vibration. It is common for the individual, at this juncture, to begin observing synchronicities, a timely conversation, an unlooked-for solution that materializes, an individual who offers spontaneous assistance, an insight that emerges upon waking, resolving an issue that previously seemed intractable. Florence consistently clarified that these occurrences are not isolated miracles. They are natural outpourings of a mind that has finally aligned itself with the spiritual truth, that good flows through unexpected channels when met with zero internal resistance. The precise word dissolves this resistance. It opens channels where previously there were barriers. Another powerful facet is the refreshed perception of self-worth. Many spend years believing they must validate themselves in order to merit prosperity. When they begin to employ language rooted in self-recognition and respect, a profound internal reorganization takes place. The individual realizes that deservingness is not a reward, but an inherent state. They begin to grasp that they need not petition the universe. They must simply accede to abundance. Florence Scovel Shinn asserted that good does not arrive as a concession, but as a reflection. What you hold to be true about yourself manifests organically. It is striking how one's discourse can reshape physical and emotional comportment. Previously, the individual walked with taut shoulders, a fatigued expression, burdened by heavy thoughts. Now, they address themselves with kindness, with resolve, and with wisdom. This novel self-treatment cultivates a specific internal atmosphere that repels trepidation and magnetizes possibilities. An atmosphere where ideas flow with greater clarity, where courage surfaces effortlessly. Florence maintained that the word dissolves the mist that obstructs a clear vision of the path ahead. When one chooses to designate money as a partner rather than an adversary, the entire paradigm shifts. Money ceases to be a source of anxiety and is transformed into a tool. It stops symbolizing scarcity and becomes an expression of order. It moves from being something remote to something responsive. This transformation is subtle yet potent. Florence Scovel Shinn elucidated that what one emotionally humanizes draws closer, and what one demonizes recedes. By treating money with reverence, clarity, and ease, an individual permits it to occupy its rightful position, not above, nor beneath, but in service to them. As this comprehension matures, the individual recognizes that the spoken word is not merely a spiritual technique, but a way of life. They begin to speak with equanimity about everything: the future, relationships, work, and challenges. They no longer dramatize, exaggerate, or incite storms through emotionally charged rhetoric. They become someone whose discourse is constructive, uplifting, and harmonizing. Florence asserted that the tongue, when wielded judiciously, can be an instrument of continuous creation. The individual who masters their speech attains a profound serenity that radiates outward to those in their vicinity. And then arrives the most beautiful juncture of this journey. The individual begins to share what they have learned, not because they seek to persuade others, but because their life has transformed so radically that the mere example serves as an invitation. Family members begin to notice their composure. Friends perceive their lightness. Those close to them start inquiring about the shift. And it all commences with the simple, yet revolutionary, realization that the word holds power, that naming is creating, that speaking is sculpting. This is the moment when each person can choose how to proceed henceforth. They can continue to lovingly observe their speech, fine-tuning a detail here and another there, allowing prosperity to become as inherent as breathing. They can recall the tenets of Florence Scovel Shinn whenever doubt surfaces. They can reiterate affirmations that reinforce their elevated identity. They can mentor someone in need. They can fortify their spiritual life through small acts of verbal faith. And it is here that I conclude this journey with you, extending a sincere invitation. If this content resonated deeply within you, if it awakened a novel perception, if it kindled an inner light, I would ask that you subscribe to the channel. Not as a mere formality, but as a gesture of continuity, akin to someone deciding to walk this path alongside us. This platform exists to deepen and expand these teachings, and your presence makes a tangible difference. Furthermore, I genuinely encourage you to share your narrative with the community. Recount what this reflection stirred within you. Describe how you previously addressed life and how you intend to speak to it now. Specify which outdated words you plan to relinquish and which new declarations you have resolved to embrace. This act of externalizing strengthens your internal commitment and inspires others. Before concluding, I offer one final consideration directly inspired by the essence of Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings. Every time you consciously select a word, you subtly reshape your destiny. Nothing transpires with clamor. Everything originates within you, residing in the subtlety of your articulation, the refinement of your intention. Life responds to the appellation you assign it. Wealth responds to the designation you confer upon it. You, likewise, respond to the definition you impose upon yourself. Choose names that uplift you. Select vocabulary that paves the way forward. Embrace affirmations that recall your inherent nature. And then, observe with profound serenity how the external world meticulously rearranges itself to mirror the identity you have resolved to embody internally.